every single day.
People want to connect with someone who...
Self-expression is life.
It is the challenge. It's a challenge of life.
You can't get mad at other people for not seeing your vision.
It was all about a grind. Like I said, I was selling CDs, DVDs, and clothes out the trunk of my
Whatever
car.
it takes.
Welcome back to Hustle Chronicles podcast. I'm here with my very best friend, Ian Ouellette. I'm so happy you can finally be on this now that you're an entrepreneur. Just start off by explaining who you are, where you're from, and how you got to where you are today.
Thank you for having me. So Zach said I'm Ian. Zach and I actually met in college, I think. Bilge Buddy is a company I started 2 years ago. It's kind of the journey through a couple different experiences in life. I'm a data scientist by training, but got into software and technology about 8 years ago. I'm also a guy who has a million good ideas. So when those kind of roads intersected, I learned a lot in my last gig about making software, making technology. I'm a boat owner and avid, I love my boat, right? So I started thinking about technology ideas about boats, right? And so I came up with Bilge Buddy, which is basically a device you put on your boat, and it helps you keep it safe by alerting you with text messages and things like that when things are going wrong and you're not there, so you can react and solve the problem. You want to hear about how I got there?
So first, just explain, you came up with this great idea. This was approximately 2 years ago.
2 years ago, yep.
How do you take a idea and turn it into an actual product?
So I think there's a couple things, right? It's I guess the first question is why was this good idea better than the other ideas, right?
Yep.
And I think there were two moments that changed this one, right? Actually, one of them was you. And you were like, enough with the good ideas. Just take one to completion.
Yep.
Just take one. And then actually, our hardware engineer at the last company I was at, who I ended up founding this company with, he's my guy who I bounce all my ideas off of.
Love it.
And typically he's like, yeah, it's a pretty good idea. And then he pokes some critical flaw in it. And I'm like, oh, yeah. And I move on. He didn't say anything after this one. And then he called me back 2 weeks later. And he's like, I've been talking to people with boats. I don't know anything about boats. He's like, but this one actually has legs. We should do this. I said, yeah, let's do it. And I kind of had your conversation fresh in my mind. And I was like, you know what? This is, I think, the best idea I've had. Let's just do this and learn along the way. Because, if I don't start it, you're never going to know.
Yeah.
Right? And we'll be smart and we'll cut it off if it, turns out to not be the right thing. But don't let it just die in conception, I think was the big thing. So then, we were pretty lucky from getting the product off the ground. Myself, Justin, Ben, who's our software engineer, we'd all worked at the last company together. I knew that they were studs. They knew how to make all the components. I knew how to design what the customer needed, So we had a prototype within a month.
Wow.
Sitting on my boat. It ran all summer, last summer, like clockwork. We had actually no issues. We learned a lot from it. And then in the fall, we called up Ben and said, hey, we need some software. And between that effort and taking the prototype, which was a little hacked box, you can imagine a clear box, a bunch of electrical components, wires everywhere, bigger than it would ever be. We basically took that idea, put it into an actual product, which is into this box, and we built the software interface. And our main goal was to go live in November for the Fort Lauderdale Boat Show. We missed that by a couple weeks. And so then we ended up launching at the Boston Boat Show. And that's kind of where things got interesting. But that's a whole nother kind of thought process.
So your strategy has always been try the boat shows, test the market, see what the people actually need, what they're willing to execute on, and then pivot, right?
Yeah. I think one thing I've learned from year one is don't focus on being as efficient as possible, right? So we've spent a ton of cash on boat shows this year.
Yeah.
And we're probably going to spend a lot next year, to be honest with you. Is it the most efficient marketing spend for like dollars spent to dollars purchased? Not really, right? But there's no real event that gets you closer to your customer, right? And so one of the more fascinating things that we had on this journey was in the summertime, we come up with all these features, right? And we're like, these are the features and this is the one that people are going to love the most. This is going to be, and then people start using your product and you're like, wow, you don't know anything, right? And they know everything. And at the end of the day, all that matters is what they think, not what I think. So with the boat shows, you get to talk to a lot of people. You get to see what lights them up when you're pitching and what doesn't work, so you can refine your marketing message. You get a bunch of wacky ideas, but you also get a bunch of good ideas, right? Stuff you hadn't thought about.
Yeah.
And I mean, coming from me, it'd be hypocritical, but every idea is a good idea in my attitude. You take a swing, right? So you're close to your customer, and that allowed us to pivot on our marketing, pivot on our product, pivot on our roadmap. So it's been super valuable, and something that even like our goal for year one was to refine our marketing spend, but I'm not that interested in refining the boat show aspect of it because I'm not willing to get farther away from my customer than I am right now. So
I think that's great. I think what you just talked about is pretty much where everyone stops, right? They come up with a good idea, they start hitting an obstacle, it feels too difficult to them, so they stops them in their tracks. And one thing that, you know, as your best friend, as someone who's been advising you on this entrepreneurship journey, one thing that I've really admired is just go with it. It's not going to look perfect. I know you're a perfectionist, but you're going to learn so much along the way that will help you pivot, because that is what it is to be an entrepreneur, is the being able to pivot when you know it needs to be pivoted. So you've had so much experience. You've worked in so many different types of corporations. How has that played a part in what you've now taken all of those experiences and put into Bilge Buddy?
yeah, so I've been at a bunch of different gigs, but I think I'd split it into like two core learning experiences, right? And that is the one of corporate America. And then that's another of hyper growth tech startup. The corporate America one is pretty simple. I don't like it. I think it's as simple as it is. And the reason I don't like it is my experiences, multiple experiences there is I was a young guy, fired up, trying to make a difference, had actually some genuinely good ideas and wanted to move fast. And there were a bunch of people that stood in my way because it would expose how poor of a job they'd been doing
For sure.
to that date. Basically.
Probably a common theme in a lot of large companies.
Yeah, and it was frustrating. I joined for about 8 years. I worked for a high growth startup. Started off as their data scientist. I'm an analytics guy by training, but ended up by the end owning the entire technology group: hardware engineering, software engineering, data science. That was a really interesting company. I am so thankful for that experience. I learned a lot. I grew a lot, but I also learned a lot of things like not to do type of thing. I learned what getting too fat and having too many employees can do to your cash flow. Just choose through cash, right?
Yeah.
So for Bilge Buddy, we have no employees, right? We chose giving our key people ownership in the company so that they're invested that way. And then we do outsourcing to everything, right? But I think the most important lesson that I learned from that company is we had a really cool product in concept. Everyone said they wanted it, but then no one wanted to pay for it.
Yeah.
And in a way, now that I look back, I think I did a disservice of like out hustling a core problem. Like it didn't matter how well we executed.
Yeah.
We were bumping up a thesis that was flawed. Right. And with Bilge Buddy, the thing that made us say go was I had got my engineer, not my engineer, co-owner of the company, right? He didn't know anything about boats, went out and talked to a bunch of people who had boats. They instantly got the product. They instantly got the value prop. And if there's not product market fit, almost nothing else matters. Right. So I think that's a long-winded way of kind of explaining how, like, I'm very much a guy who thinks about the value of what didn't work and then translating that to like what did work. So in the early stages of my career, I learned a lot about things that don't work. And Bilge Buddy, you know, didn't have any of those alarm bells going off in the early stages. It still doesn't. It's not that we haven't had hurdles, but every kind of critical time we get to something, we're like, this is still good news, you know? So we got to work on it.
You've talked a lot about failure. You've talked a lot about how that played a part into the success that you've had early on with Bilge Buddy. A lot of people get hurt by failure, right? And I know, being so close to you for a decade now, you really embrace failure, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And a lot of your past experience growing up is now coming to fruition in this company. So when you think about the word failure, what does it bring? What kind of emotions does it bring to you?
Failure to me, most of the time it really doesn't, you know, I think of failures in the past when I was a kid, right? And I didn't know any better. And like, those are great. You know, people don't like failing, right? But now I'm really thankful for a lot of failures. But I think the one word that I would say now when failure occurs to me is knowledge, right? You know, I kind of look at any situation as like, hey, I could head in all 360 degrees, right? And if I fail, it says, whoa, dude, don't go to that 180 ever again, right? And so then I know the target is at the other 180, right? And so I kind of think of it as a statistics data nerd guy, right? But I think of it as like the search space, and I just cleaved off half the pie. I don't have to worry about it anymore, right? So, I mean, you want to fail smart, right? You don't want to bet the farm and then fail. But like, I mean, like, look at our marketing this year, right? We've tried a bunch of different channels. The majority have not worked. But through having the discipline to fail smart, we know what channels work for us. We know when we should splash cash and when we shouldn't. Right. And we know what channels to try to go get and find and go get more of, right?
And like go deeper.
Yeah. We have a great online reseller, one of our biggest partners, right? They've moved almost a third of our units, right? We want to find more of those guys, right? Because they've been great partners. And that's where my effort needs to be, right? Rather than wasting more time. And it's okay to waste as long as you learn.
So how long did it take you to figure out this strategy?
I mean, it's been about a year. Right. It's been about a year. I wouldn't say, I mean, we have a lot to learn, right?
No, but
we are shockingly smart compared to what we were before.
Right. And you know how many business owners I talk to, and like within 30 seconds, I realize they should have abandoned this part of their strategy years ago, but they're so caught up in the moment that they can't take a step back. So the fact that you've learned from your mistakes in only a year is just going to make you so much stronger in the end.
Yeah. Yeah, no, you have to adapt, essentially.
So walk me through, I know you come from a family of entrepreneurs. Walk me through what that looked like, you know, growing up in an environment where entrepreneurship was obviously foreign, right? Because you guys grew up in a very different type of community than you and I are raising our kids in. But walk me through what it was like to live in a family of entrepreneurs.
Yeah, so it's only recently that I've kind of wrapped my head around this, right, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
And I think I actually took it for granted a little bit. So my father used to work for a company called David Standard. And it was this company that made these big machines that would extrude plastic tubing. So melt plastic pellets down and extrude plastic tubing. Well, one of his buddies, Ray Quinlan, and he decided, to hell with this. Let's quit these jobs. We'll buy 2 of these machines, or I can't remember how many it was. Let's say it was 2. And we're going to start making plastic tubing. And that was in 1988. I was 1 year old.
Wow.
Okay. And I got to think about the guts, actually, that it would take to, you know, twin boys, right? I'm a twin. 1 year into fatherhood, and you just say YOLO, and you're just going to go do it, right? Incredible, right? they ended up building that company up. It's out in Connecticut, local here. They built it up. They started making, basically the tubing that you put in your house. They got a contract with GM. They made every sheath on the brake cables of GM cars for decades.
That's insane.
Low margin, but, great cash flow, right? And then my father went over to Europe, I think in the early 2000s, to a trade show and came back and was like, Ray, we should start making this stuff called medical device tubing. And so they stood up a white lab, did the whole thing. And Hitachi ended up buying them.
Wow.
For a lot of cash about 8 years ago.
Wow.
And growing up in that environment, I didn't actually even really realize how much of a startup my dad was in, mostly because I have to give credit to him and Ray. They ran it like an ops business from the beginning.
Yep.
Right? So they were super smart about their cash flow, about their sustainability. So it was very stable, if I'm honest with you. And then I have in my extended family, I have an uncle who's been like a huge mentor to me, like a second father. Actually, he gave me my first job. And
What was your first job?
It was at it was actually before that. It was right at school. It was at Bioassets Development was the name of the company. It was a biotech company, and they were doing a sciatica drug out in Australia. It was 2009. I couldn't get a job. So this was kind of like, hey, come work for me type of thing. Yeah. But also they needed me to do some analytics to help speed up their drug trials, like finding people who could benefit from the drug essentially in the hospital system. And, he hooked me up with one of the consultants that was working for the company, and that was my first boot camp, right? And I got to learn about, I think he'll laugh when he hears this, but I had a meeting with this guy, Ed Alfano, who actually has passed now, unfortunately. Young guy, had an accident, but he sat me down after like 2 weeks of work and was like, he's like, I know you're fresh out of college, like when you got an A-, you're probably pretty fired up. He's like, but when we walk into the boardroom, like there's no A-, there's only A+. And I was like, okay, noted. Lesson learned. So that was the start of the boot camp. Really turned me into a professional, but it also taught me about entrepreneurship and taking risks and taking home run swings. And the nice thing about home runs is you only have to hit a few of them. Yep. You don't have to hit every ball. Yep. Right. So that's another good lesson.
So your father didn't build a business to be acquired, right?
No, I don't think it was ever the plan, right? They built a business because they saw an opportunity. I don't think they made necessarily like a conscious decision between like, this is going to be an income business or like a high growth thing. There was just really only one path to make it work, right? It wasn't, the late 90s, early 2000s. Right. It wasn't tech, right? You kind of had to build it up. Yep. Mom and pops, right? They were smart. Another lesson I learned from them is they really invested when they invested in people, they invested in those people. Yeah. Right. And the people that they decided to take on, they cared about and they wanted to make as successful as possible.
Absolutely. Yeah. I know sports was a big part of your childhood. Mm-hmm. How do you feel like your relationship with sports and being part of a team has played a part in not only your entrepreneurship journey, but like you raising a family? Oh, yeah. Yeah. So how do you think that has played a part in who you've become?
Sports played a huge role in my development. I kind of talk about family members and mentorship of how they've given me certain qualities, right? Mm-hmm. We talk about life struggles, which we haven't talked about all of them, right? But there's been a bunch that I've taken from that. Sports, I think it goes back to the failure thing, right? You fail all the time in sports. Yep. All the time, whether it's in practice because you're learning a new thing, or even when you're proficient at it, you're just competing against other people who are as good or potentially better than you, right? So you're going to fail, right? Sports has given me a quality of never giving up and never stopping. I love it. And football was big, right? Because football, from the opening kickoff, you get punched in the face, right? Yeah. And Mike Tyson has a great quote. I'm not going to say it, right? But everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face, right? Yeah. And it teaches you to not linger on that first hit. Yep. You got to shake your head, clear your mind, and figure out what the next step is, right? So yeah, the value of sports, and I kind of think of football, right? Like, am I going to put my son James into football now? Everything we know about concussions,
Right.
And everyone would be like, "Oh, you're crazy with the concussions," right?
Right.
And they're real, right? It's a real problem. But I'm kind of thinking about the positives that I pulled from it, right? And like,
Does it outweigh the negative?
well, and I'm starting to like, it's not a slam dunk. It's not obvious like, oh no, concussions are too risky, we won't do it, right? Because he might garner some really amazing things from that experience. So they played a huge role.
Let's get into like the technicality, right? If I were looking on the internet, I own a boat. Let's say this boat isn't close to me. It's 20, 30 miles away from my home. What does it look like in terms of finding your product and installing it? Walk me through the specifications of from the second you receive the box in the mail to installing it in your boat.
Yep. So there's a lot of complicated solutions on the market, right? One of the reasons I was interested in this market is I'm a big believer in like second mover advantage.
Yep.
So like the last company I was at, we had to explain why they should move from pickup trucks from horse and carriage, right?
Yeah.
I don't want to do that anymore. I just want to explain to people who love pickup trucks that they shouldn't buy the Chevy this time.
Yep.
They should buy that Ford one this time, right? Give it a go. So concept was already introduced, but there was no like mass market solution, which was affordable, but also easy to install.
Yeah.
So with our product, comes in this box right here. I don't know if we can see it on the screen, but it comes in this box.
Open it up, show 'em.
Yeah. There we go. Here, hold the mic real quick. So this is the product here. It comes in this kit, instructions, example of it in actually my Bilge. The device right here. This is our device. So you'll notice single device, small. What that means is we sell these for about $300. The competition's at $500 to $2,500, right?
So that's 40% cheaper.
Yeah, we want to be the foundation approachable piece. With that, from the installation perspective, these wires, other systems are standalone systems, right? So they have to be wired throughout the boat. Part of the novelty of this, and one of the good parts of my idea is there's this existing system on your boat called a bilge system.
Yep.
And it's a 12-volt system. Just think of it as a bunch of wires that run from the batteries to a couple switches down into the bottom of the boat, and its job is to pump all the water out. So this integrates with that, and the really cool thing about that is we're using all the existing wiring within the boat to get insights that other systems need their own wiring through the boat, right? Mm-hmm. It's powered off that, everything like that. And we're able to sell this really easy because we have DI wires. We have mechanics. Wiley.
Come. Sit.
We have mechanics who resell our stuff, and we have retailers, right? And so the way we explain it is if you can install your own bilge pump, if you can install your own float switch, you can install this. If you can't do that, call one of our partners, right? And they'll do it for you. So it's really kind of the same thing of any device that people in the boat industry have. They either do it themselves or they need help, and we just help them make that decision, essentially.
Now, someone like myself, right, who maybe never did anything technical before owning a home, I live my life now on YouTube, right? Like, if I'm going to try to decide between if I'm going to hire a professional versus if I'm going to do it myself, right? The first thing that I do is I go on YouTube and I try to decide what the opportunity cost is. What would you say in terms of, for someone like myself who can follow instructions on YouTube but wouldn't consider themselves very technical, what would you say, how would you say the setup is for them?
Yeah, I would say anybody who typically watches YouTube videos and does things like change a light switch, right? How do you patch a hole in your tire, right? If you're willing to watch a YouTube video and do that kind of stuff, you can totally do this, right? The reality is you need to cut 2 wires. Cutting 2 wires makes 4 ends. And then you put my 4 wires in a certain pattern to those 4 wires, and you take a lighter and you heat solder it together. So that's all you need, really.
And what would you say the number one advantage to having this device in your boat? What are you going to get out of it? What's the return?
So it's kind of like cameras in your house, right?
Yep.
Hopefully you never have to use them.
Yep.
Right. What it gives is peace of mind. So I love my boat. I drink my own Kool-Aid. Like, this exists because I love my boat so much and there was a problem, right?
Yeah.
And I worried about it all the time. I would run down to the boat at different times. I would show up to the boat and the batteries would be dead. I'd look like a fool, right? Luckily, I never had any water or sinking events, right? But now I can just lay in my bed and look at my phone.
Yep.
I'm like, oh, she's all right.
And can you start the Bilge right from the app?
Yeah, so while we are kind of the affordable foundational solution, and people like that, they want simple, they just don't want complicated, we actually have very novel, so we have a patent around this. So everyone else kind of counts if your bilge goes off, it'll text you if you have high water.
Yep.
Our device, because of the way we wire, it actually can remotely control the pump.
Wow.
So there's a couple benefits for that. So it'll test your bilge pump every day. And so it'll tell you the day your pump fails. Wow. So what happens for a lot of people is their pump will fail. 3 weeks later, a rainstorm fills it up.
Yep.
So they had plenty of time to fix the problem.
Right.
Right.
They didn't even know.
They didn't even know. So we'll let them know about that. And then there's a thing called a float switch, which is, think of it like a light switch. And when you're not there, you can't hit the light switch to turn your pump on, right?
Yep.
So this thing floats up and it clicks like a light switch and it pumps all the water out, right? So that's a second piece. And so if that breaks, which is really common with salt water and corrosion, we have this high water sensor, which you put above it. And so our competition will tell you that you have high water, just like we do. Ours actually turns the pump on as a backup.
Wow.
And pumps all the water out. And then the third piece that causes boats to sink is because we're powered on that bilge system, we get voltage from the battery, which has to run the pump. So we cover all three of the common failures that cause boats to sink proactively. And no one else can really claim that right now. So that's pretty cool.
As Marley just all of a sudden busts in here during the middle of a podcast, right? It kind of reminds me of your journey, right? You're a father of 2, soon to be a father of 3.
Yep.
So congratulations.
Thank you.
This is probably the first time that you're announcing that your wife's having her 3rd kid. So
No, most people know now.
okay.
Yeah.
How has having a family, being the leader of your family, how does that relationship with entrepreneurship, how has that changed this journey for you?
Before, if you'd asked me this before I had kids, I think I would have said, well, it would be terrible, right? It would make me risk adverse. It would make all of these things, right? It's actually had the opposite. I think, just confident. I mean, I'm a confident guy naturally, probably blindly so, right? But when you have kids, you have to start making decisions.
Yep.
And you learn even more so than before that it doesn't really matter what you choose, but delaying a decision is the worst thing you can do, right? So it's helped me with that. Confidence, right? Persistence. If there's one thing parenting is, it's a lot of simple tasks over and over and over again. Yep. So it's more of an endurance game than a difficulty game, right?
Yep. A marathon.
Yeah, and consistency, right? And I think all of those things for entrepreneurship are key, right? I mean, I'm not the biggest Tom Brady fan, but I saw a video of him the other day and he got me, right? And he said, to be good at something, you just have to be one of the things that most people are not, right? And that's consistent.
Yeah.
Which is huge, right? And so parenting teaches you to be consistent, both from a discipline and growth perspective, but just because you have to, right? So I think it's pretty cool.
One of my favorite Ian moments is when Ian asked me if I could help him move. So I think you were moving from New York City.
No, from Boston.
From Boston back to
down
New York.
To New York City. So
to go live with his
I
future
finally
wife.
got a job down where my girl at the time girlfriend was.
So when most people ask you for their help in moving, you're expecting, you're going to bring couches and dressers and all this stuff. With Ian, he literally had a duffel bag and I think a snowboard.
I had my snowboard. No, it was all dirty laundry. It was like
dirty laundry bag.
Dirty laundry thing. I had a duffel bag with my clothes and I had a backpack with, I think I just wanted you more hang out with me.
So I remember picking you up and in my mind, I was like, at the time, I think I only had the Prius, right? So I'm like, this is never going to all fit. And then seeing that you had 3 items and, driving you to your future wife's apartment to come move in with her, and just thinking to myself, this is insane, right? Because my whole life, I have so much baggage, and you, on the other hand, have always been as baggage free as possible.
Minimalist, yeah.
Yeah. So how is that concept, like, where does that come from?
Yeah, so it comes from, I think, two things. One external, one internal, right? The first one is my mother was a hoarder. So I was always kind of navigating that through life, right?
Yep.
Like, where's my stuff? I want to put something on the counter. I can't. My friends want to come over.
Embarrassed.
Correct, right? So that's one piece, had a big impact on me. And then the second is kind of just innate. I'm not really a stuff guy. People think of me as kind of organized and it has a plan and everything like that. But as far as like my personal items, like I'm always missing one of them.
Yep.
Like my phone, wallet, cell phone, keys. Like, actually, my wife got a tag for my keys. I was like, oh, this thing's nonsense. I don't really need this tag. You wouldn't believe how often I use the thing. But yeah, I'm just not a stuff guy, right? So like, to me, I'm more about who I'm with, the things I'm doing, and all that stuff is kind of a means to an end. I'm more like, I'm into it if it's gear, I think is the best way to describe it. If it's extraneous or, I don't take a lot of photos. I'm not a photo guy. I like to kind of experience and then kind of go back in my memory and remember it the way I want to remember it, not the way the picture tells me it was,
Absolutely.
So yeah, I think that's really the effect of like minimalism, right? And it's correlated to business too, right? Because you think about like, what do you need? Like, what exactly do I need, right? And like, I've thought about hiring a few people, or I've thought about like outsourcing one of the few functions that I still hold on to.
Yep.
And I'm like, well, wait a second, I can do this. It's not affecting our success right now by distracting me. Why would I jeopardize my cash flow and my sustainability because of it, right?
Yeah. So let's take that, right, and just apply it even further. When you look at Bilge Buddy, walk me through what the next 1 year looks like, and then if you could have a crystal ball, what would the future bring for Bilge Buddy? Yep.
So I don't think I could be more excited for year 2. I'm pretty proud of what we've learned and what we've built. So the reality is we set out to have 100 customers this year. We'll have 500 or more before the year is over.
So cool.
Right? We've learned when to spend marketing. So, what have we done, right? What have we accomplished, right? So we got a bunch of happy customers who are going to be showing their buddies, who are going to be promoting for us. We didn't have that last year. Like, I'm super psyched about that, right?
Yeah.
We have a few resellers who have made some money, right? Moved a bunch of units, have faith in us that we'll do our end of the bargain.
Sure.
We know that they'll do their end of the bargain.
Sure.
So we're excited about doing more business with them. We want to find more of them. Really, that's the big thing, right? So we're going to spend smart on marketing from our direct marketing. We're going to get word of mouth marketing, which we didn't before. And we're going to be really, really smart about business development. And we're going to probably invest most of our time in business development because those people have customer bases. They know who's going to like our product, who wouldn't. It's just an incredible resource. And we're willing to give up some of the pie to get access to that value, right? So I think that we'll do a substantial amount of sales next year. I still don't think I'm at the point where we won't reinvest all the money back into the business. None of the ownership is really of the mind that, we want to drain funds out of the company right now. Because we think there's just so much value in every dollar we get in growth. So we're really excited. We'll always be, if we wanted to be, we could be cash flow positive, right? Based on our growth and kind of our plan, I don't think we're going to do that. Ultimately the goal for Bilge Buddy is, we all three of us, Ben, Justin, myself, we all kind of had like a, who are we and what are we good at?
Yeah.
And we're really good at the early stage. We're really good at the creative stage.
Yep.
And when something needs to get into like refinement and ops, like that's not us. So our goal is to grow this to about 3,000 to 5,000 customers. Okay. And then we want to partner with folks or transition to folks who can do it better than us in a kind of an operations perspective. And then we can go off and do something new, something that we're good at again.
Yeah.
Right. It goes back to the corporate America thing, right?
Yeah.
Like when it gets to that stage, there's nothing wrong with corporate America. Some people love it, right?
Sure. Some people are going to spend their whole life in it.
And some people are really good at like ops business.
Yep.
Right. It's just not us, right? And so we're trying to be smart about what our exit plan is. And I don't want to say exit. Exit's kind of like a finite word, right? Finite word. It's how long we'll stay as the main drivers, right? And so we know we'll need help after about 3,000 to 5,000 subscribers. So
I love it. I think there's two things that you've brought up that I just want to hone in a little bit on. The first one is B2B. I think this is our 32nd podcast. I think you're one of the few entrepreneurs that are focusing on B2B versus B2C. So I know obviously you've talked about your strategy with resellers. Let's dive deeper into that. And then the second thing is you talked a lot about metrics and KPIs, and it sounds like it's something that you're very focused on. So let's dive into that also. So let's first start with B2B. So for anyone that's watching that wants to understand the difference of a business concept from a B2B versus a B2C, why don't you just start off by walking them through what that means?
Yep. So there's a long kind of thought process for me. Actually, one of the reasons I wanted to get into Bilge Buddy is I really was just genuinely curious about the B2C value prop.
Yep.
Right. So I could come from industrial tech where it's like, okay, I'm going to sell you this tech. What's the business case? What's the ROI? Yep. Oh, it's not the 20X that we require as X refiner. Mm-hmm. We're not doing it.
Yep.
To an emotional based sell, right? Mm-hmm. Just like your Nest cameras, right?
Yep.
Thank God the majority of our customers, their boat's never going to sink.
Yep.
So it's just a different sell. But from a Bilge Buddy perspective, like we have direct to consumer.
Okay.
Where we do the trade shows. Yep. Right. We do direct marketing. Meta is really great because Google's been okay, but Meta's amazing because people disclose what they like, what they don't like. Sure. Right. And we are a niche product, right? Not everyone owns boats. Yep. There's a ton of boat owners. There's plenty as far as our addressable market. Sure. But it really helps us get to like legitimate buyers, right? So that's big for us, and the Meta premium is worth it if we're honest, right? But that direct to buy, you got to build a brand, you got to build trust, right? And you have limited marketing spend, right? Yep. So I went to the first boat show in Boston, and I was walking around, and you see Garmin there, who makes the kind of the digital screens. They're called chart plotters on boats for folks that don't know. It's a core piece of, think about the central screen in your car, sure. Right? It's like that. You see Ray Marine, you see some of the guys with the cool optical cameras so you can see at night. Yeah. You see all those guys. You see the manufacturers, right? Yep. But then you see a whole slew of guys who are selling all types of brands, right? They're just an electronics retailer, right? And then you see a whole slew of guys who are ex-marine electronic electrician, right? In the Sudbury area of Massachusetts, just trying to win some business, right? And we're kind of looking at ability to scale, and we team up with. Can I name names on this? So
you can name whatever you want.
So we team up with the GPSstore.com, right? One of the best things we ever did. They make a good profit off of our stuff. We're more than happy with that because they've moved, a quarter of our business, right? Wow. They took some time to evaluate our product, but then we get on their site. Everybody who's ever bought electronics for boats has heard of them.
Wow.
Right. So the product being on their store gave us legitimacy.
Yeah.
And then, we're spending all this money trying to get to the top of the Google searches, right?
Right.
They launch our product on their website with the first week. Every time you search like boat monitor,
Comes up.
there's Bilge Buddy, not ours though, theirs.
Yep.
Right. So ton of value there.
Yeah.
Right. And then I get a call from them like 3 months after they brought us on. It's like, do you want to participate in our 105,000 person email blast?
You're like, yes.
Yeah, I do. So how much, right?
Yeah.
So you start to think about what all those things are and scale, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so the boat shows themselves don't just represent like opportunities for us to talk to buyers, but sellers,
Yeah.
right? And I'm, it's crazy. It's kind of a radical thing to say, right? But I totally see a world where we have such good B2B partners that we actually shut our direct buy site off.
Wow.
And drive the business to them, right?
Is there any businesses that you can name that do that?
Well, yeah, there's a ton of businesses,
Okay.
and there's in the boating industry specifically, we haven't done it yet. One thing that's unique about the GPSstore.com is they buy directly from us, right? It's just different business models of what they're doing. It's not just like an old way of thinking or anything like. Some of them just only buy through distributors. And we have not gone to the distributor route yet because there's kind of a middleman.
Sure.
Pros and cons there,
Yeah.
right? We haven't been incentivized to do it yet. We're definitely considering it next year. But yeah, it's the scale aspect's big. And then we have, they have an e-commerce platform, right? They sell all different kinds of products, right?
Yep.
Then we have the mobile mechanic. So the average person boat owner does a certain amount of work themselves on their boat, and then they hit their skill ceiling. And everybody varies.
Yeah.
But I would say the majority of folks don't do all the work, just like your house. Like the majority of people don't do work on their house, right? We have these folks who their main workplace is like a van. They got stickers all over the side of their. I mean, it's big business. It's not, this is not like mom and pop stuff, right? But they have a clientele base of thousands of boat owners.
Sure.
They know whose boat sank, whose boat is always sinking, and they're calling them. Who has bilge problems, right? Who likes tech, new gadgets, stuff like that, right? So they know their customer base. And so when you actually think about like the metric, right?
Yep.
The cost to acquisition of a customer, right? Well, giving up 50, 70% of your margin might actually cost less than directly marketing to someone, right? So they know that they can go right to them and say, hey, I think this would be great for you. And then they also have the trust from that customer because they've done business with them for 10 years, right?
Sure. And they also have the incentive.
Totally. Yeah, they're incentivized. We're incentivized. The customer actually gets value.
Yeah.
There's very few situations in business where you can get three parties winning at the same time, right? Some of the other product ideas that I have center around video analytics, video AI in the marine space. Very interested in that. But like, I don't want to distract myself from Bilge Buddy right now. Sure. But basically the concept, and there's actually a bunch of companies out there doing it. Again, they do it for like enormous costs.
Yep.
And I made a video analytic product in the oil and gas refinery space. I did together with a team, right?
Yeah.
I was a team member of that. Learned a lot from that, and I think we could do it at a more accessible way. And I have another idea of how to integrate it with existing systems to the boat that already exist to make it easier. But the whole concept centers around there's a lot of stuff that a human being has to keep track of.
Yeah.
I went on an offshore fishing trip with our buddy Lon and a couple other guys last week, and in the middle of the night, I'm stumbling around the back of the boat as we're running 3 hours out to the fishing grounds, and I'm like, damn, if I fall off this boat right now, they wouldn't know.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of different things going on a boat that's hard for a human being to keep track of, both daytime and nighttime. And then there's the phenomena of, I call it the GoPro, where everyone's filming. It's all this filming.
But then what are you doing?
But nobody ever sees the video. Where does it go?
Yeah.
Right. And the issue is video is a ton of data.
Yep.
Most of it is useless. And so I think there's some really cool things for what people do on boats, both for fun, but also for safety. that could be solved through me flagging and highlighting and curating and packaging video data that's really interesting and throwing out the rest of it, basically.
Smart.
Yeah.
I mean, isn't that what Samsung's basically doing now with their voice AI is like you record everything and then Samsung could say, here's a summary of what happened. So they're basically taking all of the lead work away from you.
Yep.
Why couldn't you do that on a boat? It's very smart.
Yeah.
One of the interesting parts of your product is you probably have a lot of customers that have come back to you and given you some sort of success story of how it saved their boat. So walk us through what that has been like and, how rewarding it is to hear from that.
So I guess the best way to explain it is every single time someone comes and is like, your thing helped save my boat. It's like, jumping up and down like you just hit a home run, basically. And the feeling's awesome. I fire it off to Justin and Ben, send it to the ad agency, be like, we got new content, right? But it's kind of amazing. Like the first success story we had actually was, I think it was like the 5th unit we ever sold. This guy bought 2, Wayne, actually from Stonington, near where my father lives, small world type of thing. And he'd bought one for his buddy, Joe. And within like a week, Joe calls me. He's like, dude, you saved my boat. I'm like, that's not possible. Like, you just bought it. Like, no way. He's like, yeah. He's like, I keep it in the water in the wintertime. He's like, my heater broke. And I was laying in bed one night and I noticed that like the boat was getting really cold. And there's a bunch of freshwater systems in boats that you're supposed to drain in the wintertime if you're not using it. He was using his boat, right? And he had the heater going. But if that had frozen, he would have had to repair a bunch of stuff, right? So that's pretty cool. We've had my uncle had a bunch of fishing line wrapping up around his bilge pump, which was causing it was ejecting water. So we thought it was still working, but it was like seizing, kind of like half seizing. So we warned him of that. We've had a whole slew of people who their bilge pump or float broke and our system notified them. None actually sank because they were taking like, they had a hole in their boat. A lot of times it's just like rainwater filling up the boat. You don't realize how much rainwater fills up boats. Sure. So we've had a bunch of success stories for people saving their boats that way too. So.
How about failures? How about hearing about people who are dissatisfied with your product? How's that changed your business?
So we've learned a lot from that. I'd be lying if my heart didn't drop like every single time. And I don't think I really want to get in the habit of my heart not dropping, because I think the number one thing I've learned from failures is just do right by the customer. Like, doesn't matter a lot of times what the fault is or the cause. It's just like do right by them, right? So the big failures we've had are mostly from our customers trying to install the device themselves and doing it incorrectly. And they basically fry it. The nice part about this business is it actually doesn't, the way the model's set up with that, you buy the device and then you pay for the cell connection and access to the software and all of that. We want your business year 1, 2, 3, 4. So the point of sale of the device is not the end game for us, right? We want to be with you on a longer journey. So it makes it really easy. You don't have to like even debate in your head. It's just drop ship them a new one. Can you send the other one back, right? And so we get the new ones back. We look at them, and many times we've put a lot of defensive mechanisms into our device now. So we've there's a phrase that people use all the time. I don't want to use it because I don't think of our customers like that. But yeah, we've taken away some of the the errors that people can make.
Sure.
Right. We have had a couple manufacturing defects. Right. We had actually one that I've kind of bummed me out quite a bit because it could have been such a success story. We had a guy, an older gentleman, who bought our device, didn't fully understand, technology and all that kind of stuff. And he had his mechanic install our device. His boat actually started to sink.
Oh, no.
And we never alerted him because he never downloaded the app. He didn't understand that it was going to he needed to set up the app. Sure. Right. So that was a real bummer. Luckily his neighbor saw it. So the boat was saved, but it could have been such a great story. Right.
Yeah.
And he's still a customer. He's very happy. He understands the whole thing. But it was just kind of a bummer. So biggest thing we do is do right by the customer and then make sure we learn. And if we can defend against that happening again, we make sure we do it.
Right. Now you just learn how to probably inform the customer of downloading the app right away and making sure it's integrated. So with every big failure, a big learning lesson happens.
Yeah, the other thing I've learned too is, and this isn't a marketing pitch, right? Because you would never say this, but there are products, every product you use, the manufacturer knows there are certain issues with it.
Yep.
It's impossible. Like, it literally is impossible. You're going to make something and it's going to have like a flaw. Now, is it a critical flaw or not?
Sure.
Right? So we just placed a big order with our CM, right? And our contract manufacturer, with folks don't know what that means. And we were debating, do we do 500? Do we do 1,000? I said, let's do the lower number because it's their first time making this, right?
Yeah.
And there's going to be little things that we notice, right?
Yep.
So let's be careful about that, right? So these things will happen. They're unavoidable. And that's what you have to realize too. Is like, you take them personal, but like, there's no product that was ever launched. I mean, think about junk, like how many things went wrong with junk, like so many, right? And they will continue to go wrong. And there's something else will happen with us too. It's what you do after is the most important part. So
that's awesome. It's a great learning lesson for anyone who's trying to get in the product industry. And yeah, it's very relatable to entrepreneurship. If you could have a billboard anywhere in the world, what would it say and why?
If I could have a billboard, I think it would be more of like a meme billboard, just because I love reading billboards. I think about how we used to put Chris Palco's number on, like when like the ROTC was recruiting us. Yeah. Like, oh yeah, here's my name, and was Chris's number. I think I'd do one of those like lawyer billboards with myself in like a slick suit, like making eye contact, pointing at the drivers going by and say, hey, heard at work. And then I put your number, call Zach Cohen.
Thank you so much. All right, I'll change my number. Do you have any questions for me?
I think the biggest question I would ask you is I try to be humble. Like, I don't know where this journey is going to bring me, right? Like, you've actually been through like an experience where I don't want to say you got to the end game, but you definitely got to a milestone, right? And so I'm just wondering, like, any of the things you heard from me today, right? What are the things I'm not thinking about, or what are the things things I should think a little differently about?
Well, I think the part that I love about your journey is that you're going to these trade shows, so you're hearing immediate feedback, whether it's positive or negative. That part to me will be very helpful in your entrepreneurship journey, and especially when you need to start pivoting the product or making, fine-tuning the product. So congrats on that. The next thing that stands out to me is just how nimble you're being on your feet. You're trying to keep your overhead as low as possible. Most entrepreneurs do not do that. And that's usually their biggest issue, is that their overhead is too high, their cash flow is too low. And if they don't make their nut, then what do? So I think you're on to all the right things. I think your idea of where the future entails versus what you need to focus on now to get there, these are all the right moves as someone who's just starting off a business. And, one thing that I've really enjoyed, since you and I have talked about this product a lot, pre-launch and post-launch, is just like how open you are to feedback and hearing what others think. And a lot of entrepreneurs I talk to, they actually don't want to hear what I think. They just want to talk and for me to tell them that's the right move. So, as you continue this journey, you're going to meet a lot of different people. My specialty is not in product. It's in services. So, one thing that I've learned by networking with other entrepreneurs is that you might have a completely different business than me, but there's something that you can learn from everyone's experience. So keep that learning curve as small as possible and you'll be successful.
So true. Actually, the guy who taught me all about wholesale ran a hardware. So like my B2B strategy and my pricing model is from a guy who ran a hardware store.
I love it.
Because I was like, I've never bought or sold anything wholesale. Who would know this?
Sure.
And this guy, Jerry, at our boat club, I was like, let me talk to Jerry.
Turns
out Jerry knows a lot more than you think.
I love it. So if people want to purchase a Bilge Buddy, if people want to reach out to you, hopefully some resellers see this podcast, what's the best way to reach out to you? What's the best way to get the product?
Yep. So bilgebuddy.io. is our website. That's the best way to get a hold of us. You can buy the product there. If you're interested in getting a hold of us, the contact page has our phone number along with a contact form. Spoiler alert, those go directly to my phone. So my phone rings if it's a call and I pick it up, or it pings if it's an email. We have about 5 people who monitor that line, but I'm the guy who picks up whenever I can. So give us a call. 203-212-8828 is our number. We're more than happy to talk on the phone. You'll always get a real person.
It's great. It's been awesome to finally sit down with you. I know that you and I have been talking about you wanting to jump into the entrepreneurship journey, what it feels like since the day I met you. And I'm just excited. I think there's a lot of good things ahead for you. You're a very hard worker, but next time we sit down, I think you're going to be way farther in your entrepreneur journey than people can imagine.
I'm actually
such a short
interested on what's changed, what
Yeah.
I thought was going to happen, didn't happen, and what things I didn't foresee, right? Like,
Absolutely. That wraps up episode 32, the Hustle Chronicles podcast. Thank you very much, Ian.
for having me.
Shout out to all of our followers, viewers. Like, comment, subscribe, and we love you very much. Thank you so much.